So here we finally are, over a year later, with another video in this series. Last time I covered Catwoman, and now I'm back with the Riddler and Two-Face. For those who don't remember, this series is essentially like my top 5 best stories videos, but instead of ranking comics, I rank episodes of cartoon shows. This includes all cartoon shows these characters have appeared in, no limits. As usual, these are my personal opinions. Write your list in the comments, or better yet, make your own video. At this point, even a monkey can make a YouTube video. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Number 5. Around the World in 80 Riddles from Super Friends. That's right, I'm actually putting a Super Friends episode on the list. In the Catwoman video, I said the subsequent ones would be more diverse, and that wasn't a lie. This 7-minute episode was the only solo appearance the Riddler made during the entire Super Friends era. In it, the Riddler suddenly appears in the Batcave and sprays Batman, Robin, Superman, and Wonder Woman with a stupid spray. A spray that makes people gradually lose their intelligence. Unless the heroes find a proper antidote within a time limit, they will end up stupid forever. In order to find the antidote, which the Riddler has hidden away, they must of course solve a series of riddles first. But how will they accomplish this with their diminishing brain cells? So obviously this is a very silly and goofy episode, and I mean very goofy. But that's part of why it's so good. Seeing Batman and the gang devolve into moronic simpletons with the vocabularies of mentally impaired 2-year-olds is a ton of fun. And the Riddler himself is also a ton of fun. A wacky jumpin' jack straight out of the Silver Age comics. This episode overall feels very much like a Silver Age comic, despite the fact it was made in 1980, well into the Bronze Age. The plot is also very fitting for the Riddler. He is the guy who always wants to be smarter than everyone else after all. So making everyone else stupid is straight up his alley. Sure, it's cheating, but then again, Eddie Nigma is kinda known for cheating. If you wanna see a plain fun and ridiculously goofy Riddler cartoon, I highly recommend this one. Number 4. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich? From Batman the Animated Series. The first Riddler episode on the animated series. This one tells his origin. Edward Nigma, a game designer and creator of the immensely popular video game The Riddle of the Minotaur, is unjustly fired by his supervisor, Daniel Mockridge, who wants all the profits from the game for himself. Eddie then vows revenge and returns as the Riddler, a suave, riddling supervillain. The Riddler plans to kill Mockridge in a life-size replica of the maze from his game, filled with traps and tricky riddles. It's of course up to Batman and Robin to save this smarmy Mockridge from the crazed rogue. Now, I've actually reviewed this one before, so if you want my detailed opinion about it, I suggest you look up that video. Suffice it to say, it's not a perfect Riddler origin. It does have some flaws. Like, where does the Riddler persona even come from, when all Eddie wanted was to get revenge on Mockridge? They kinda gloss over his origin, and maybe it should have been a 2-parter instead. But despite these nitpicks, it is still a pretty great episode. A Riddler revenge plot is interesting and fairly unusual, as most versions of Eddie isn't motivated by vengeance. This makes him a bit more sympathetic. The best part about the episode, in my opinion, is the climax in the maze, when Batman and Robin are solving all those crazy riddles and avoiding the death traps. I find these riddles and traps to be very creative and fun, and this is, in my opinion, the best display in a cartoon of the Riddler's kooky puzzles. That's one part they often struggle with. And naturally, the animated series Riddler, voiced by John Glover, is always a delight to watch. Number 3. Riddlers Revenge from the Batman. Not the first Riddler episode on the Batman, but it is his origin episode. In this one, Batman busts up the Riddler's revenge plot against crooked businessman Gorman, and as a result, the two arch foes ends up trapped together in a container, sinking down to the bottom of Gotham Bay. While trying to find a way to escape and save their lives, the Riddler takes the opportunity to relate his origin story to Batman, and tell him why he wanted revenge on Gorman. Turns out Eddie used to be a scientist employed by a Gotham university. Eddie and his partner Julie invented a device that made people smarter, and Gorman, being the shady businessman that he is, wanted a cut of their potential profits. Eddie wasn't interested though, and rejected the greedy codger. Julie, however, was interested, and thus secretly plotted against her partner with Gorman, sabotaging the device during a demonstration, thus getting Eddie out of the way. Eddie knew Gorman was behind it somehow, however he didn't suspect Julie, and inspired by Batman, he became the Riddler, a devious rogue hellbent on revenge. So this episode is clearly very similar to the animated series origin, but believe it or not, I think the Batman actually handled it better. It almost pains me to say it, as I vastly prefer Taz to the Batman. This origin is just better done. We get a better look at Eddie's past, and his reason for becoming a riddle-themed supervillain makes more sense. Flashbacks explain that he's been obsessed with riddles and puzzles his entire life. We even get some nods to the comics, and the theatrics of Batman also serve as an inspiration. We didn't get any of that in Taz. Also, Gorman is basically this version's Mockridge, but here we also get the addition of Julie, a woman whom Eddie loved, and her betrayal makes this story infinitely more tragic. The only thing about this episode I don't like is the Riddler's terrible visual design. I hate it. But that's how he looked throughout the entire show, so it's not a fault of this episode in particular. Number 2. Enigma Consulting Detective from Justice League Action. Based on Paul Dini's Detective Comics run, in this one the Riddler has gone straight and opened up a detective agency. The Joker kidnaps Batman and then challenges the rest of the superhero community to save him by solving a series of riddles. Wonder Woman and Green Arrow are on the case, but they soon find much needed assistance from an unlikely ally, the reformed Riddler. Eddie doesn't necessarily care about saving Batman though. He's more upset at the Joker stealing his riddle gimmick. Thus the Ace of Knaves must be stopped at all costs. Justice League Action is of course the newest show featured on this list, and before I watched any of the show's episodes, I assumed it was all just kiddie crap. It's not. It's actually a pretty great and hilarious show. I still haven't seen too many episodes though. Anyway, this Riddler episode is simply fantastic. It features a perfect Eddie Nigma, a smug, arrogant jerk who sees himself as intellectually superior to everyone else, yet he's still likable as hell. We've also got his OCD side and obsession with riddles present. Basically, Riddler ripped straight out of the comics. Besides taking cues from Paul Dini's run, this episode also resembles another of my favorite Riddler comics, A New Dawn. In that one, Eddie teamed up with Batman to stop King Tut, who was stealing his riddle gimmick. Swap Tut for Joker and Batman for Wonder Woman and Green Arrow, and you've got this episode. Easily the most comic-accurate depiction of Riddler in a cartoon. It's actually a great Joker episode too, as his motivation for doing all of this is hilariously perfect. I almost put this episode as my number 1, but personal preference intervened. And number 1 is Riddlers Reform from Batman the Animated Series. By far Eddie's best episode on Taz, no contest. I've reviewed this one too, so if you want to know more, look up my Taz playlist. Anyway, so in this one, the Riddler has seemingly left his supervillain days behind him and turned to toy making. Batman suspects otherwise though, and begins to see clues to Riddler crimes everywhere. Is he simply imagining it, or is the Riddler's Reform truly a sham? It is, sort of. You see, Eddie simply can't stop himself from pulling riddle crimes, at least not as long as there's a Batman out there to challenge. I actually like this episode even more now than I did when reviewing it. I don't see any issues with it at all any longer. Some complain Riddler's Reform isn't real, unlike Penguin's in the episode Birds of a Feather. Well, this isn't really the same type of story as Penguin's Reform. In that one, the Penguin really wanted to walk the straight and narrow, but other people ruined it for him. Here, the Riddler has everything, tons of money, fame, women, yet he himself ruins it, because he just can't help it. As long as Batman exists, he simply has to riddle him. The Batman is the only one worthy of the game, as Eddie puts it. It's a sick obsession. This episode is just as compelling as Birds of a Feather, but in a different way. It's tragic in a more disturbing way, as unlike Pengy, Eddie is mentally ill. Pengy struggles with society, while Eddie struggles with his own mind. I really regret not putting this episode on my top 15 Taz episodes list. If I made that video now, it definitely would have been included somewhere. I'm not saying I like it more than Birds of a Feather though, so don't get me wrong there. Anyway, my favorite Riddler cartoon episode, a great and disturbing look at the King of Conundrums. So there you have it, my top 5 Riddler cartoon episodes. Don't forget to tell me yours. As I said, I'll also be doing Two-Face, because of course. But after that, I've got nothing planned. Not at the moment anyway. I might return to this series sometime in the future, but I'm not gonna make any promises, as we all know how that turned out last time. Two-Face may not be the very next video I make, but nevertheless, I will make it pretty soon. Anyway, as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.